And she lives in a trailer in Thornton, which she maintained
Okay.
up north. And
Nice to see you. Hope you have a full belly now. That was good soup tonight. I had the cheeseburger soup. Hadn't had that before. Winning recipe. Dig it. Whoever made that, give me the recipe later. So they are not even in here because they're cleaning up. Okay. Well, tonight we have a really special guest. Her name is Kelli Melissa Reinhardt, and she is the founder and executive director of a local nonprofit called Make Mental Health Matter. She founded this nonprofit after a journey walking through really a tragedy in her family, which I'm going to let her share more about that. But because of that, she has turned her sorrow into so much gladness for so many people. And I'm really excited to have her here. I had the opportunity about 6 months ago to collaborate with her organization and through a leadership program I was part of, and got to know Kelli and what her organization does, and just fell in love with what she's up to. So tonight, she's here to share her story, share more about Make Mental Health Matter, and more than that, she's here to share about mental health, suicide awareness, and how we can help those in our community who might be facing these really hard things in their life. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Kelli. Please give her a warm welcome.
Oh, yeah. I'm going to move this because I tend to move a lot. So I'm going to put it over here so I don't knock anything over. Thank you, Mary. She is going to hand out a couple things. You don't need to look through them yet. I will tell you what to do with them. But I'm going to tell you a little bit about self-care, really. We're going to have a conversation about mental health. I'll tell you a little bit about me, and then we're going to talk about mental health and how we can help others. So I'm curious, how many of you are happy all the time? Don't everybody jump up. Yeah, there is never a time that we're all happy all the time. But what are those things that make you happy? And you can shout it out, or maybe you want to think about it. But what are those some of those things that truly make you happy? Pets. What else? Friends? Music. Love that. Sports. I heard something over there. Sunshine. Food. Family. Swimming. So many good things. Yeah, I hear family. definitely one thing that makes me happy. This is my husband and my 9-year-old son. They are my everything, and we just have a really good time. So I heard family. And I don't know about you, but Baby Yoda makes me really happy. I know his name is not Baby Yoda, it is Grogu, but I call him Baby Yoda, and he makes me so happy. You can see just even in my face, I get really excited when I think about Baby Yoda. It's that thing that lights me up, that thing that helps me just feel grounded and makes me really happy. So I want to tell you a little bit about myself. I started this nonprofit, Make Mental Health Matter, because I lost my middle sister, Carrie, who died by suicide in 2017. I wasn't educated. I didn't know how to help her. I didn't know how to help myself. And over time, I learned how to know how to help people, know how to help myself. I took a lot of classes. I got a lot of certifications and education. And that's what I decided I would give back to the community, is how can we help ourselves, but how can we also help others? And so we're gonna talk a little bit about all of that wrapped together. Because the reason we may or may not take care of ourselves first is because we're doing the best that we can at that moment with the resources that we actually have available. And sometimes we don't have very many resources. For me, before my sister passed, I didn't have the education. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to help her. I now look in retrospect of the things that I could have identified to be able to help her. But I was doing the best that I could with the resources that I had at that moment. And that's how we go throughout life. So when we know better, we can actually do better. So those are the things that I want to give you today. I want to talk a little bit about words, because words really, truly matter. The words that we say to ourselves and the words that we say to others. If we are somebody who walks around like what I like to say is the Eeyore, nobody loves me, everybody hates me, I'm gonna go eat worms. You can notice even my posture, it's very down and I'm just sad because nobody likes me. Or we can change those words and give it power. I'm strong, I'm beautiful, I'm brave. That changes just my physical body, and this is my power pose. Personally, I love this power pose. The superhero pose. It brings up my energy. It also, as you notice, my head comes up, and when I change my posture and I change my words, it changes my attitude, which also helps me when I'm trying to help myself or I'm trying to help others. So words really, truly have power. The other thing that you may have noticed is that when I talked about my sister, I said she died by suicide. Instead of using the words completed or committed, successful, those may be some words that you've heard, but those words, when we talk about suicide, it's really part of that stigma. So in the mental health space, we're trying to change the dynamic. We're trying to break down the stigma. So I invite you to shift your words as you talk about suicide. And the phrases that we talk about is died by or death by suicide, because it takes away that stigma. If you think about committed, committing a crime, committing a sin, or being committed to an activity, and we don't want people to feel like that's what they need to do, right? We want to be able to have these open conversations because suicidal ideation is much more common than you would imagine. You may know, or maybe you've had these thoughts before of, I could just drive off the edge of this road and nobody would even notice. Or, I just don't want to wake up tomorrow because I'm so exhausted. Those are actual suicidal ideations, so they're much more common than you would think. So when we can change our language, when we can change our verbiage, then it really helps to break down that stigma. And now we can have open conversations. And how cool is that, to be able to just have a conversation with somebody and not have to judge whatever they're going through or experiencing, and not judging ourselves. So just keep in mind, words have power. It also, talking about your state, how I was going from Eeyore into the power pose, there is one other thing that is super easy when we talk about changing our mindset, changing the words that we use. It's simply smiling. One of the best parts about this is we always have our mouth. It's attached to us. So we take it with us everywhere we go. It's not something that we have to go and get. It's not an action that we have to go and take. Our mouths are always with us. It also scientifically has been proven that when you have the upward motion of your mouth, it releases the endorphins and the serotonin and the dopamine, what I like to call the happy juices of the brain. It's the simplest way to change our mindset and our moods. And this is one that you can fake it till you make it. If you're in a bad mood, it never fails, if you start smiling, that you'll start to get in a better mood. And it's contagious. I'm sure you've noticed people walking down the halls, they're smiling at you, and what do you do back? I don't like you. I'm not going to talk to you. No, we smile back, right? Because they're smiling at us. So it's something that's very contagious. And it's a great way to just change your mindset and change your mood at any point in time, wherever you are. Because sometimes we have to get out of our own way. We have to take the ego out. We have to shift into being happier people. And who doesn't want to be happier? I don't know, maybe you don't want to, and that's okay. Do your thing. That's okay. But we really have to just shift out of our ego and start focusing on, what do I want in my life? How do I want to live my life? How do I want to help others? The other part of this is the mind and body are connected, therefore they affect each other. So when we are in that Eeyore stage all the time, we probably will have bad health. We'll probably have illnesses, disease, or have a diagnosis come up. Or throughout our body, it can manifest other things like pain and headaches and all those things, because our body is connected to our mind, and it's very, very powerful. So just keep that in mind. So I want to shift a little bit into talking about more of the science behind moving from negative into positive. And I'm curious, how many of you judge yourself? Yeah, everybody has judge, right? So we all have a judge. We judge ourselves. We actually judge others. How many of you have judged others in the past, right? You're like, oh, why are they wearing that? Oh, why are they smiling that way, right? It comes up. It's a natural thing. We actually, within our brains, we have what are called saboteurs. It's those things that take us into that Eeyore. Oh my gosh, I'm sure you've heard this one. If I didn't have bad luck, I wouldn't have luck at all. People say that all the time. That's because we have these saboteurs that are pushing us more towards the negative versus that positive. Because our brains really are designed for fight or flight. we go into fight or flight, even though we're no longer being chased by bears or mountain lions or all those things back in the day. I wasn't alive then. But caveman times, right? We had to go into survival mode. We had to go into fight or flight. And so our brains naturally do that. It is designed to protect us. And that's why these saboteurs come into your brain. And the number one saboteur is a judge, judging ourselves and judging others. So why I'm talking about this is because it's important to also shift from those saboteurs of my biggest saboteur is called restlessness. My brain is already on to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing before I'm done with this thing. That's how my brain and my body processes. I keep going. That was the same when my sister died. I just kept going. That was my coping mechanism. I just kept going, and then I hit what I call the virtual wall, where everything came crumbling down, and I finally had to realize I had to take care of myself. So that's when I shifted and I started learning and I started forgiving myself and forgiving my sister, which was something that I never knew I needed. I had to shift from my saboteur brain into what we call the sage brain, which is that positive brain. So the saboteurs are that negative brain, and then your positive brain is called your sage brain. So that's how we make those shifts. We can really start to understand ourselves better when we start taking care of ourselves. Because, as I'm sure you've heard before, if you've ever gone on a plane, what do they tell you? Yes, put on your oxygen mask before you help others. As a mom, I'm like, no, I got to take care of my kid. But I can't take care of my kid if I'm passed out on the floor. So I have to put my oxygen mask on first before I help others. This was probably one of the biggest lessons I learned throughout the whole training and everything that I've done over time, because I'm such a caregiver, I'm such a provider that I want to help everybody else. But when it comes down to me, I forget about me. And I know that was the case with my sister. She was a caregiver. She was a CPR instructor. She took care of a paraplegic. At the end of the day, she had nothing left for herself. And I really, truly believe that's what it came down to. So taking care of ourselves is so important so that we can take care of other people. And in society today, how many times do we actually say, well, you're selfish. Taking care of yourself is selfish. It's not. It is necessary, and it's something we all need to get better at. So I have 7 strategies that I actually do total, but there's no way that I can put all of those into right now. So if you happen to have your cell phones, this QR code will take you to my website that you can actually download all this information. It'll give you the 7 strategies, and it'll give you what is called the safety and self-care plan. And the reason why I have you do this now is because I'm about to talk to you about the safety and self-care plan. So I'll give you a moment. And anybody who doesn't have the camera, there is a piece of paper that I gave you that would have this QR code too. So, but I'll give you a second. And you can, if you take a picture, if you're not close enough. Oh, they are pretty big. Those are giant. If it's not working, take a picture and you can click on it later and go. But this will give you my entire 7 strategies for mental wellness. and then also give you access to that safety and self-care plan that you can download, print off, and actually use it. And if you don't happen to get it at this moment, that's okay. I can send it to Mary too. I think most people got it. Okay. So I want to talk to you about this safety and self-care plan. It was intentionally designed with a triangle in mind. If you think about a triangle, it is the strongest structure in the world because it has 3 equal sides. We also, as humans, we have 3 brains or 3 minds, and that is our head, our heart, and our gut. So those are our 3 brains, and different things go through those different processing. So if you're thinking analytically, it's through your brain. If you're thinking with your feelings, it's going through your heart. And if you're thinking with your gut, you've probably heard the saying, trust your gut. So that's where safety comes from. Safety comes from our guts. So they talk a lot about mental health and gut health and how they're related, which I already told you, the mind and the body are connected, therefore they affect each other. So when your gut health is not good, then your brain health is probably not very good either. So it's important, why I'm telling you this, is because this self-care plan is designed with your head, heart, and gut in mind. So there are different sections on here. People who have my back no matter what. Before you put anybody on this line, please have a conversation with them. I am not your 2 a.m. person. I live and breathe this world on a daily basis. I have to have my sleep to provide for my family. I understand that about myself. However, if you came to me and said, hey, Kelli, you are the only person that has my back, I need you as my person, I will say, okay, let's have a conversation. What does that look like? I know that if they're calling me in the middle of the night, I'm going to put them on that contact list that comes through whether I have do not disturb on or not, because I'm that person. And maybe if you are somebody who experiences mental health challenges often, make sure you have a code. Maybe it's pineapple. You're like, today we're talking about pineapples because I'm having a really hard day. But I know that that's different from an everyday conversation that we have. And I know that we're talking now about crisis. So before you put anybody on this list, please have a conversation with them. And you only have to think of 3 people. It is very intentionally designed with 3 in mind because you don't need to have this giant list. So 3 people that have your back no matter what. 3 things that you're grateful for. They can be big. They can be small. It could be the toothbrush that you brush your teeth with every day. It could be this community. It can be as little or as big as you want it to be. So just 3 things. People, places, objects that make me happy. Also, when I feel triggered, so if you are somebody that has had mental health challenges in the past, you may know what triggers you. For me, I know when my husband or my son are irritating, they say something that's irritating, or anything that they do is irritating me, I know that moment that I'm getting triggered and I probably need to do some self-care. So those are my triggers. I know my triggers now because I know myself well enough. So if you know, it's a great place to put them. And then lastly, I know I'm safe when or where. So if there's a place that you feel safe, like in church, or maybe there is a person that you feel safe with, just 3. And then any resources that you might know. So there is one already on here that is the crisis line. That can be text, chat, but it's a great place to start. And if you don't know, 988, simply dialing 988, that is the National Suicide Crisis Lifeline. You never know when you might need to use that or somebody else in your life. But it doesn't have to be a crisis. Their number one calls are about relationships, interestingly enough. But 988 is the National Suicide Crisis Lifeline now. So I want to do an exercise with you all just to start training your brains to move more into these sage brains, but then also give you an actual tool that you can use. And this is where the papers that we handed out, and if you didn't get one, I will make sure you get one, but there was a sticker that was in there, and it is a textured sticker. So this is where just texture comes in. So I would love for you, if you feel comfortable, to close your eyes or just glance down at the ground, whichever feels more comfortable. I'd like you to just notice your body. Your body in the place that you're sitting on the seat, your feet on the floor on the ground on the earth. And all of this is supporting you now. I'd like you to notice and utilize your sight, which you will have to open your eyes. But I want you to look at 5 things. So pick one thing. Notice the color, the texture, everything about that one thing, and really focus. Then pick another. What's the color? What's the shape? Does it have a sound? And do that until you have 5 things that you looked at, utilizing your sight. Now I'd like you to tap into touch, which is where the sticker comes in. It is a sensory sticker. You can even as simply rub your fingers together and notice the ridges in your fingers. Are your fingers warm? Are they cold? But really allow your sense of touch and notice everything, all the ridges on your fingers. And I want you to pick 4 things that you're touching. Maybe it's your neighbor's jacket, because it looks really soft. Maybe it's your own jacket. Maybe it's the sticker. But I want you to pick 4 things to touch. Now I want you to tap into your hearing. I want you to hear whether it's really close to you. Maybe you're hearing your own breath. Maybe you're hearing something far away, like people walking. But I want you to focus on 3 things that you can hear. Now I want you to tap into smell. I want you to smell. Maybe it's close to you. Maybe you have perfume on or cologne. Hopefully the person next to you wore deodorant. But I want you to tap into 2 smells. And lastly, I want you to tap into your taste. Maybe it's your saliva. And if you still have your eyes open, I'd like you to open your eyes and come back to now. feeling the ground, the earth, your butt in the seat, and now you're back. So that's simple, right? And it can go a lot faster. You don't have to always go in, but if you feel maybe you have anxiety coming up, maybe you have negative thoughts popping up, you can tap into all of your senses. So touch, taste, smell, sight. And it's as simple as that, to change our state and change our mindset. So that's an easy mindfulness practice that you can do anywhere. So some things that I want you to think about as we wrap this up, and I will give you an opportunity to also ask questions if you have any. But we want to start shifting our state. We want to start taking care of ourselves. We want to utilize the words that are going to empower us versus put us into Eeyore mood. We also want to catch our judge, because sometimes our judge is wrong, judging ourselves or judging others. And we can play around with that and say, I caught you, judge. I caught you. For me, when I start to try to keep going, I caught you. I'm in this moment now. I'm standing here in this moment, and I have to remind myself. And I can tell my judge to stop trying to keep going. It can also be the same when we start judging ourselves. I'm not judging myself. I look good, and I'm gonna stand in my power. We can also just make sure that we're shifting into that sage brain. What is going to empower me? What is going to make me happy? How can I make myself better so that I can help others? And what does that look like for me? Because I deserve it. It is not selfish, it is necessary. And remember, you always have your mouth with you, so you can always smile. It is the simplest way to change our mindset and our mood. It is also the simplest way to help support other people. We always have our mouth with us. And that is how we're going to become much more present in what we do on a daily basis and how we can help support others in our community. So these are a couple affirmations that I love. My sister loved bears, so now my whole life is encompassed with bears. But some of the affirmations that I love is I am enough. I love myself. And what I want you to understand that it is absolutely valid to not be okay. But it is also okay to be okay. Sometimes we get stuck in being not okay, that we forget that we can also be okay. I can stand here and I can talk about my sister's story. I can share her journey and I can continue that. And I can celebrate her life because that's what I do now. I choose not to stay in grief and loss. I choose to celebrate. And I am okay to be okay. I do not judge myself for that, and I don't allow others to judge me for that. Because it's absolutely valid to be okay. So I give you your power back and stand in whichever you choose, because that's your choice. But I hope that you choose to be okay. So some of the resources that I love to give, which I already told you a little bit about, is 988. It is the suicide crisis lifeline. You can call, text, or chat that. We also have a trusted resource hub. So if you're looking for more resources, which is the page that I gave you, the 2 pages, It is a short compiled list of Colorado-based resources. I didn't want to give you a book, so it is 2 pages. But those are some of our trusted resource hub and then other people that we collaborate with. But the one that I love giving everybody is 7cups.com. They have 24/7 chat listeners. It is not a crisis line. It is just somebody that will listen no matter what you're going through. You cannot be in a crisis. They won't help you. But if you're not in a crisis and you're like, I don't have anybody to talk to, that is a great resource. It's 7cups.com, and it's all chatting. So, and you all already got our free download, which is the QR code. Lastly, if you choose to, I also do a TV and radio show that gives you people resources. So I bring on guests who are either professionals or advocates of mental health or those with lived experience to really show you the hope, show you that you're not alone. So you can use that as a resource too. And lastly, why does all this matter? Because you matter. Every single one of you matters in here, and taking care of yourself is a priority that you should do. It is not selfish. So if you want to know where we are, you can always find Make Mental Health Matter across every social channel. You can also go to our website. You can also send a message to Mary. She knows how to get a hold of me. So I want to open up this space. Whether you have comments or questions, I would love to answer those and or allow you the space to share anything at this moment. Thank you. Yes. Do you want microphones? Okay. I do have a microphone up here. It's on. Okay.
I just wonder if you're seeing more age related to any particular ages right now. Are more people coming in of a certain age?
So we cover the whole gamut from young to old, and based off of like the CDC, for suicide specifically, or are you talking more mental health based? Both. So suicides, the highest rate currently is white males, middle age. Those are the highest rate currently. It used to be more youth, where it's kind of shifting a little bit. In Colorado, suicide is still the first leading cause of death for ages 10 to 14, but it's getting better, not statistically, but the numbers are shifting down. But the highest rate currently, as of 2 years ago, because the numbers are pretty behind, is white middle-aged men is the highest. So, but the epidemic of loneliness is higher than it's ever been. And that's with community, but we saw a shift outside of the pandemic because people were isolated. So the loneliness is still part of the stats that we see. Thank you for the question. Yes. So I don't have the specifics for military. We know about the 22 a day, which is pretty accurate. If you look across the US, there's 132 people that die by suicide every day, all across, not just military. But the most recent stat that I saw was about 34 a day for military. So the 22 number is actually lower than what it is currently, but that number sticks in people's head just to like remind us that and it fluctuates every single year, it fluctuates. So Yeah, I don't have the exacts of military, but I do know it's higher than 22 per day. Yes.
So I think this is really good for self-help. I think this is really good for self-help, but I'm wondering if you know someone you think is really struggling, how would you approach this?
Yeah, I love that question. And I do, I like to keep this more on the like how you can help yourself, but I love when the question comes up. I usually, if there's another layer, I go into like the actual like suicide prevention intervention, because that is one of the classes that we do is applied suicide intervention skills training. So if you notice somebody, the best way, we know that suicide is time limited. So there's a very short window when people are actively suicide, like the intention or the action behind it. So when we can intervene in those time frames, we can actually start to save lives. So I like to talk about it from my personal experience of my sister, is that she was very upkept at all of our family events. She would always come with her hair done, her makeup done. I look the Christmas before she died, and she looked very disheveled. Like she was very tired. She was also diagnosed with MS not too much before that, so she was always in pain, always taking baths. But I didn't recognize that at that moment because I just thought it was my sister being my sister. But now that I have the new eyes, the training, I can see how it was starting to unravel. She created a fight with my other sister, so they weren't talking. She also sent my niece and nephew away to their dad's house. She also was in a fight with her boyfriend at the time. And she actually called the people that she knew would not report back to her family that she was actively suicidal. My sister attempted 6 other times, so we knew in those moments she would call us, she would say, I love you, take care of my kids. Like we knew at that moment, so we hung up the phone, called and got her stomach pumped, put her on a 72-hour hold. We even put her in a mental health facility at one point in time. But it was 5 years in between the last attempt we knew of and when she actually died by suicide. And so we didn't know anything in between that. But when you start to recognize, so some of the signs, giving away personal items, it can be mood shifts. So if they are normally somebody who is really, really happy, then all of a sudden their mood drops, and or vice versa. I like to talk about it with youth, is like if they're like really depressed all the time, then all of a sudden they become really, really happy. Those are the mood shifts that we often don't recognize because as a parent, we're like, oh, good, they're getting better, the therapy's working, or whatever we're doing is working. But now we know that most of the time is that they now have a plan and they're okay with dying. Like they feel better because now they know the end result. But that's the time frame that we can actually intervene and get people the help that they need. Most people who are actively suicidal, most of the time it's because they've never been heard, understood, or allowed to just be in a space that they're not judged. So if you can really truly like turn off all the judging, all the judgment, and just listen, that's the one thing that really saves lives, along with community and connection. And that's what research has shown, is that community and connection are truly the 2 things that will actually save a life. Because when we can make those connections, then the loneliness goes away. And now they are in a space that they probably feel really safe, and they can have those open conversations with somebody that will actually listen, because most likely they were either like pushed to the side, they were pushed into therapy, and or they just haven't had anybody who cared. So there are lots of different things, like nobody's the same, right? So it'll probably present differently. There are those times that suicide happens without warning, but most of the time is that we just don't know how to watch out for it or what to listen for. And it could be as simple as them talking about death or dying often, the mood shifts and giving away things, and or I'm trying to think some of the other ones, hygiene wise. I think that's all that's popping in my head, but yeah. Does that help? Not necessarily. Oh, yeah.
Repeating
The question.
Yeah.
So he asked if Alzheimer's and dementia lead to suicide. Dementia, sorry. Not necessarily. More common is that they don't, because the brain is so out of normalcy that the action behind suicide is actually much more complex than we would imagine. It takes a lot to get to the place of the action of dying by suicide. So when somebody is living with or experiencing dementia or Alzheimer's, the cognitive function usually doesn't connect. So, but I also wanted to mention over here, the best thing that you can say to somebody if you are concerned, there's 2 questions you can ask. Are you thinking about suicide? Are you thinking about killing yourself? They're very direct, but there's a reason that we do them direct, is because the brain loves clarity, and harming and hurting are very different than suicide or killing. So be direct and ask the questions direct. They may say no, and that's okay, but they also might say yes. We also may have to ask it again, because if you ever think about when you walk down a hallway, you're like, hey, how's your day? Great. Hey, how's your day? Great. Our brains have automatic thoughts or responses. So sometimes the first thing that comes out is a lie. I'm great. I'm fine. Everybody says we're fine. But then when you ask it again, they're like, oh, you actually care, and I'm not fine. So those are 2 great ways to ask somebody.
Listening can be a big thing, and being there for people to just listen to. But after that, you try to get them to go to someone like you. Is that correct?
Yeah, you can. I mean, I educate people. I educate like everyday people to be able to help and be in that place. I am not a therapist myself, but I have lots of connections into therapists. So yes, I would absolutely get them connected into somebody who can help them through those thoughts. But honestly, you can do it too. If you are somebody who can listen, that's usually all they need. It doesn't always take a therapist. It doesn't always take a psychologist. It just takes a person to care. And really, truly, like, that's my messaging over everything that I talk about, is that you can save a life. I have saved multiple lives by simply asking the question, which they realized they were in crisis, and then I just listened, whatever they had to say, and I didn't judge. Hey, you feel suicidal. Great. Tell me about it. What is your plan? How can I deconstruct your plan? And then that's how I help them more specifically. But it doesn't always take a counselor or psychologist. However, for the long game, it can.
Have you ever considered making care for others equal billing, giving it equal billing with self-care? Because it seems like the care for others is more empowering.
For me specifically?
As a theme for mental health, self-care and care for others, that anybody has the right and the ability to care for others and should work on that too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, being able to take care of yourself empowers you to take care of others. But if you're somebody like me who tends to take care of others before I take care of myself, that's where I like to give the messaging of, hey, it's important for us too. But yeah, that balance is really important too. Is that what you were saying? Okay.
I know that you're doing a workshop here on April 26th. What will that encompass?
Great question. So mental health first aid, that is the workshop that I'm doing. It is a general overview of mental health, substance use. We also talk about psychosis, and then it's also talking about suicide. So those two questions that I just told you is part of that. But we also go over like the general overview of mental health and how we can help somebody in each of those moments. So understanding like the different diagnoses, but not necessarily for you to be able to diagnose somebody. So it's just how to help somebody that might be struggling with mental health, substance use, psychosis, and then also suicidal ideation. We also talk about like self-harm, and there's lots of layers to it. It is a very detailed class, but you get to practice, which I think is the important part, is just learning how to help somebody. Great question, thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to share this because it's something I had not heard. I heard a preacher when we were at the district meeting, and he was talking about self-care. And he said, and I know a lot of you think that's totally in contrast to everything the gospel preaches. He said, but I want you to think about this. When Jesus was asked for the two great commandments, he said, one is to love God with all your heart, and the other was to love your neighbor as yourself. Mm-hmm. And he said, if you don't love yourself, you can't love your neighbor like yourself. Yeah. I thought that was really a nice comment.
I love that. Yeah, and a lot of people, if you like the words self-love better than self-care, a lot of people use that word too. So, yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing. Like, one over here, one over there.
When loneliness is an issue in a lot of this. People all of a sudden wanting to be, quote, not part of the group or not part of the family, etc., is sort of a real signal in terms of where that is. And they'll withdraw themselves as well. Is that sort of a major part of all of this to a large extent?
It is definitely. So that is one of the signs that you could see, is that they are withdrawing. It could also go into like the giving away of things, right? Like now they're starting to get rid of the things, which includes family member or friends. They're starting to get rid of those things. So yeah, it's definitely, when you notice somebody is withdrawing, I would just check in on them and say, hey, I noticed that you haven't been coming to coffee lately, or hey, I've noticed that you haven't been coming to church lately. I like to use a lot of the, instead of saying like you, it's like the I noticed, or the I observed, or the I statements are really, really great ones. Hey, I'm curious. You haven't really been hanging out with us. What's going on? Something super simple like that. So if you're noticing, I would absolutely have a conversation.
I'd just like to have you reply to the fact that the stigma that is associated with mental health or suicides, and somebody who might not complete the suicide but then is recovering from it, how much stigma affects reaching out to other people in either case.
Yeah, so that goes into, I guess there's a couple layers there. One of the layers is kind of what I was talking about, words, right? Like if we use the word successful or committed is kind of in that, and completed, they're all kind of in that positive, like the positive words. So anybody who has attempted, sometimes they say, well, if they can complete or they're successful, why can't I? Right? Like that's where some of the stigma comes in. So why we're shifting the words that we use around suicide to died by or death by, so that we're breaking down that stigma and not making anybody feel, if they attempted, that they're less than like that person that was successful. The other layer of that is when somebody attempts, they do tend to get this negative, I guess, stigma around them of, well, why am I, not that I'm successful, but what's wrong with my life, right? Like, we can be in really deep, dark places, and there are actually way more people that attempt than is ever reported. So how I like to visualize it is the iceberg. We have the top layer of the iceberg, which shows all the reported deaths by suicide. And then we have all the things underneath, which are the attempts. And they're so much bigger than you would ever think about, right? Like the suicidal ideation and the attempts, like there's so many more than there are the reported suicides. So there's a lot of layers beneath why people attempt. And so when we can start to just have those conversations, like I actually ask people because I'm a very curious person and I want to understand, like, how do you get to that place? I have never been in that place. I have been in really dark places. I have been depressed. I've had to take medication in the past, but like I've never gotten to the place that I felt actively suicidal, that I want to take action. So I'm curious now. I ask people, that's what I talk to them about, is how did you get to that place? Tell me more. Like, I want to know, I want to understand. And I have those conversations actually all the time on my show because there's a different reason for every single person. And the reason that they want to die is solely up to them. And I don't ever want to invalidate their feelings. And so when we can just start to have open conversations, it actually creates more community. It creates less stigma, right? Now we're conversating, we're having, and I know that if you think about like back in the day, we just didn't talk about it. Nobody talked about it. You did your thing, you were fine, we're all fine, everybody's fine. But now we're starting to have those conversations, and I am very excited for this generation, although there are some things that I'm like, why? But then there's other things that I'm like, wow, they're talking about it. I can walk down the street and say, I'm not doing very good today. I don't need you to fix me. I'm not broken. I just need you to know that I'm not feeling very good today, and I'm having a bad day. And that's okay. Right? Like, that's okay to have those conversations. So I don't know if that answered your question. Okay.
I have a question that those who say someone died by suicide, how do you help a family member that has, how do you guide them through a healthy grief process? Because I've known people who have, the survivors left, they take on the guilt and they don't grieve healthily. There's a different kind of grief when a loved one dies of suicide. How do you work through that grief?
Great question. So how I talk about grief and loss is grief and loss are very different for everybody. My experience is going to be very different from your experience and vice versa. There is no textbook, there is no list of what you go through when you're going through grief. I talk about it as if it's a roller coaster. Some days I wake up and I'm perfectly fine. I can talk about my sister till I'm blue in the face. And then other days there's little tiny things that catch me and I just want to lay on my floor and cry all day. That's been my life for 9 years now. So there is a process, but it's up to you. I will never, ever, ever tell anybody how to grieve. We all have to figure out our own process. There are ways that you can shift from what I was talking about is that staying stuck in grief and loss and shifting into celebration. Like those can be the conversations. But I personally absolutely hate when somebody comes to me and they say, my family just doesn't get it, and they tell me that I should be over it. That's not helpful at all to tell anybody that, because it is. It's a roller coaster. It's a process, and it could be a lifelong process, and that's okay. But there are different ways, different modalities that you can tap into. There are, I mean, like, massage is actually really good, although when you have body manipulation, some of that trauma can come out of our body, so we have to, like, understand that. There's also drumming circles are really great. Music, somebody said music earlier, right? Being able to get people tapped into certain things that they can do within a community to make those connections, that's a really great way to help people process through grief and loss. But I don't ever tell anybody how to grieve. It is your process alone. And there are different ways that you can, whether it's through art or music or whatever, coming to church and being part of a group, ways that you can process through grief. But I don't believe that there's any healthy or unhealthy way to process grief. And that's my own personal, what I've learned over time.
Well, this is really great. We have one more question, and then we'll probably have to stop.
Absolutely,
But,
yes.
also want you all to know that we have 2 counselors available if anybody would like to debrief afterwards.
Yes.
Just a brief comment, because somebody had mentioned something about dementia and Alzheimer's. Some of the techniques you've been talking here today are very important when you deal with a loved one that has that. And it's very hard to separate your thoughts and your mind and listen to what they say and what they're going through. And a lot of times they don't know what they're saying is hurting. Or they may say things, they just don't understand it. And you need to talk to somebody who's professional. I'm not. And learn how to deal with them and to separate your life from them. And what you're doing for them is done through love.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you
Thank
for
you very
sharing
much.
that. I absolutely agree that it's hard, right? Like, taking care of somebody is hard. Taking care of ourselves is hard. I had an aunt who had Alzheimer's, and my grandpa had dementia, and it was hard. And separating that is really, really hard. So yes, absolutely talk to a professional if you need support. But also connect with your community, because I bet you more people understand what you're going through than you would think. So thank you for sharing. And thank you all for asking questions and allowing me the space to be here today.
That was great. Thank you. Thank you all for coming. And next week is our last week, as Pastor Jeff said. So we have 2 people that are going to be here. And one is Aubrey Brewer. She's a master social worker, and Blair Buckley, also a social worker from our Census Counseling Center. And they're going to discuss symptoms of trauma as well as effective treatments and coping strategies. So, hope to see you here next week. Okay. Thank you.